Welcome to Plastic Model Mojo, a podcast dedicated to scale modeling, as well as the news and events around the hobby, where we hope to be informative and entertaining and help you keep your modeling mojo alive. Hello again, this is Mike. Welcome back for the latest in scale modeling from the Bluegrass State. The autumn season is settling in on us here in Kentucky, so hopefully that will afford Dave and I some increased time at the bench. Before we get started, I would like to remind everyone of the Golden Sprue Awards. By the time this episode drops, the September 25th ending of the nomination period will have happened. The next phase is the actual voting of the top nominees, and this will take place from October 3rd until October 31st. So please jump on the Golden Sprue Awards website during the October window and vote for your favorite submissions. Now, let's get on to episode 21 of Plastic Model Mojo.
Good evening, Mike.
Oh, good evening, Dave. How you doing this evening?
I'm not doing too bad. I'm at the bench. I've got some modeling fluid in hand, and that's not a bad way to live life. So, what modeling fluid are you drinking?
Well, I hate to disappoint, but tonight I'm not.
We've been canceled and nobody told me?
Something like that. No, we went out. I'll explain. We went out for kind of a last summer ice cream, and I got a milkshake, Texas size milkshake, and I'm not sure I've got room for anything else.
What flavor?
Just a chocolate milkshake.
Oh,
can't go wrong.
Okay.
But I should have downsized a couple. I was a little overzealous on my milkshake consumption. So now that I've bored everybody with my milkshake. What do you got going on?
Well, I'm doing a first. This, I think this is the first time I've ever repeated a modeling fluid. We're 21 episodes in, and I'm actually.
No, you've doubled up on Gumball Head.
Well, have I? Because that's what I'm drinking. I'm drinking Gumball Head from Three Floyds. It's as good as it always is. You turned me on to it the first episode we recorded together, and I got to tell you, it's become a favorite. I enjoy the heck out of it. It's a really good beer. I recommend it to any of the listeners out there.
Well, on the Three Floyds vein, I've still not heard back from them yet about that box art for their Barbarian Haze IPA.
We may have to make a phone call on that one, because I would really like to find out what the story is on that.
Well, I'll tell you, we got a pretty full mailbag.
All right.
Lots of stuff.
Well, go ahead. Let's hear it.
Stephen Schaefer. He's from the Twin Cities area in Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul area. He sent us some photographs, and I think the guys that on the bench talked about this too, so he must have sent them the same pictures, but some really stunning pictures of a Zukimura 48 scale F4J Phantom.
It's a beautiful kit.
And he's done a heck of a job too. In addition to that, he just wanted to say that he's missed out on his 4th annual Wonderfest, so apparently he makes it down to Wonderfest every year. So, Stephen, next year, maybe 2021, if they have it in May. God, hope we get back into something by then.
Absolutely.
But anyway, if you're there in 2021, we may be there too. I don't know. I'd like to do that show, hang out and check it out.
They're a great bunch of guys. There's some really nice models, and there's really neat stuff at it. So yeah, I would. There's no excuse for us not to attend that show and try and do a little recording if we can.
Kip Jackson's back again, and he's talking about forums, and he mentioned. Well, he asked you actually if you're familiar with the ARC or the ARC forums.
Mm-hmm.
Of course you are, and he talks about how desperately specific some of the sub-forums are on that one, but that's one of the older ones, isn't it? That's been around a while.
Yes, ARC was one of the forums back when there weren't many forums. There's Hyperscale, ARC, then Brit Modeler, and then I forget the one for Armor. But yeah, back when there were a few. In fact, that's what I in our email exchange with him. What I said was I of course had been on ARC and was on it for years, but like a lot of the big the big generalist forums, the problem was that, I have certain interests, 70-second scale. And so it was tough for me to go to ARC and weed through all of the new posts to find the ones I was interested in. So ultimately, 70-second scale aircraft forum was set up, and because that's my area of interest, that's pretty much where I hang out as far as forums go. I'll occasionally go back and look at ARC, or I'll go and I'll look at Brit Modeler or the unofficial Airfix Modeling Forum, and it's nice for an occasional visit, but I don't hang out there anymore just simply because my needs are being met by a more specialized forum.
And he also goes on to express some appreciation for Prime Portal and Scalemates that we've mentioned numerous times. So
yeah, absolutely.
Glad that's working out for him. John Rovnan just mentions another podcast, the Fighter Pilot Podcast. Real pilots talking about a different modern aircraft every episode. So if that's your bag, you might want to check that out if you're into modern aviation.
I will have to check that out. That sounds cool.
Next up is Ed Olszewski, and this is an interesting one. He's a model railroader who subscribed to FSM, Fine Scale Modeler, to improve his freight car and locomotive weathering. And just by perusing the various articles in that magazine as his subscriptions progressed, he's got bitten by the scale model bug and has queued up a bunch of subjects across a wide range of scales and genre, just really all over the map. And he says he's enjoying the podcast, and he blames us for sparking his interest in stash growth, but he's standardized on Vallejo line of paints and weathering products and going with Mr. Surfacer 1000 and Mr. Leveling Thinner as a primer. So welcome aboard, Ed.
Absolutely.
Got a new pet peeve.
Oh, I love pet peeves.
This is also a regular listener and contributor, Andrew DeBoer. Mm-hmm. And his pet peeve is the perennial question on forums and Facebook posts pages. Will this paint work with this thinner?
I sympathize because you do see that all the time. But then again, there's such a proliferation of paints and thinner lines. I can understand the confusion. I really can. Back when there was Model Master and Model Master Acrylic, 2 lines, 2 thinners, that was 90% of what was out there. But now we've talked about it before. It seems like not a week goes by when a new paint line comes out, and that many paint lines can lead to confusion.
Well, it's worse than that, because his solution is just to mix it up and see what happens, because on the forum you're going to get everything from, oh, that'll never work, it'll be a disaster, to I do that all the time and it works great.
Well, there is nothing like experimentation yourself, but there are a couple of the downsides. Is you've got to acquire both the paint and the thinner, and you don't want to waste your money if this thinner doesn't go with that paint or whatever. And also, not all of the reactions between paints and thinners are immediate.
No, that's true.
You could mix 2 things together and spray it and think, okay, well, this is working. And then an hour later or 6 hours later, come back to find that the 2 are not compatible.
That's why I use paint mules.
That's right. Absolutely.
Next up is Timothy Gidcombe from Kingwood, Texas. Hadn't had one from Texas in a while.
Yeah.
he was commenting on my mention of those Tamiya scribing templates and those new engraving tools, and apparently he has some.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that they feel nice in your hand, and because of the size of the tool, you can get into areas that a lot of other scribers won't. Several sizes to choose from, or you can buy them all. He's got a big smiley face after that. He concurs that they are expensive compared to some of the other tools on the market. And his opinion is some of the smaller sizes don't leave a clean a cut as some of the bigger ones. Now, moving on to the templates, says you can't go wrong with those. The options of all the circles, squares, and ovals gives a wide range of possibilities, and they're really flexible but quite durable. And finally, he says if we haven't seen it, Flory Models out of the UK YouTube channel did an in-depth review on those a couple of years ago, and he provided me a link. So, man, I'm late to the show, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting because those full page ads in FSM and the journal are just recent.
Yeah, read is new. So I'm wondering if what they reviewed is indeed what's being released now. So,
or maybe they've changed it or expanded it. I don't know.
Exactly.
So I'll have to check out that link, and I will put it in the show notes so everybody else can too.
Sounds good.
Drew Oliver again. He offers some supporting words for our podcast. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
And he's asking if we've also looked at the MRP or the Mr. Paint scribers. They're also cheaper than the Tamiya ones.
It would be hard for anything to be more expensive than the Tamiya scribers.
I think so, but this all warrants further investigation. So, Drew, I'll check those out as well because I'm in the market for some, none, or all. And finally, we got a lot of email about this Death of the Hobby segment from episode 20. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to take these and any more that come in over the next week or two and do a bonus episode, kind of just about the feedback from that topic without all the other segments, maybe. And
that sounds
offer
good.
Offer that as a special segment. So just to know, we got your email. We've got, in addition to all the folks we just mentioned, writing in for other topics, we've got Ethan Eidenmill, Jeff Betcher, Brian Latour, Adam Leland, Kevin Kelly, Stephen Lee, and Ian McCauley. So that's a bunch.
Yes.
It's like 7 just on this topic alone or some related tangent that we mentioned in that discussion. So we'll get that worked up and look forward to putting out a special bonus episode just on the death of the hobby or the not death of the hobby. That's all the mailbag.
All right. Well, listeners, here's that time that you all, I'm sure, fast forward through where I make the pitch for you to, when you're done with this episode, go to whatever podcasting app you use, rate the podcast. Please give it 5 stars to help drive it and make it more visible. We've increased listenership in the last few episodes substantially. So I know some of you are out there doing good work promoting it and rating the podcast on a podcast app is part of that. So if you do it, we'd appreciate it. Also, tell a friend. The single best way for us to get new listeners is for somebody who's currently listening to tell one of their modeling buddies, hey, you need to listen to this, or you should listen to this. And some of your friends may not know what a podcast is, so you may have to help them out a little, but we'd appreciate it if you do that. And finally, if you are not a member of your IPMS national organization, that's IPMS USA for all our listeners in the United States, or IPMS Canada for our Canadian listeners, or whatever nation you happen to be in, there is a national organization for IPMS. And I would take it as a personal favor if you join, because IPMS is a great organization. It helps promote the hobby. It helps connect hobbyists with each other. It provides a structure and framework for all of these local chapters to meet and be insured and to be able to put on contests without stepping all over each other's dates. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that people don't realize that IPMS USA or whatever IPMS national chapter you happen to be affiliated with does for the hobby. So please consider going to, in the case of the United States, www.ipmsusa.org, O-R-G, not .com, .org, and join.
We'd also like you guys to support our fellow podcasters out there. Scale Model Podcast out of Canada is up to episode 54. And for somebody that just stepped aside for a little while, episode 54 is an Anthony Goodman spectacular. So he makes several appearances in that episode. But of note in that episode is they have part one of a very interesting interview. Her name escapes me, but it's a young lady who is a model maker in the film and special effects industry. And that's a line of work we've all dreamed about at some point in our modeling journey. And if you haven't, you're probably lying to yourself. We've all wondered what that might be like, but please check that out. On the Bench out of Australia is up to episode 93. And they're talking about the small details and how to improve those and what to do about certain situations. So check those guys out. And Plastic Posse Podcast is up to their third episode. And they're talking to Cameron Corliss, who was one of our mailbag contributors last week. He has a YouTube channel, Wasatch Modeler, and he talks a little bit about that. So please check out those podcasts in addition to ours. We really appreciate it, and they will too. Well, it's countdown to Vegas again.
Gosh, I can't wait.
And I did not compute the number of days. Shame on me.
You can go back and fix that in post-production.
Maybe not. It's hard to get the sound to balance. Regardless, there's not much new to report at the moment. We're kind of in a holding pattern as they inch closer to the Orlando attendance record. That's about the only thing of note. They're getting a little closer to that. Vendor tables are still selling at a solid clip. We've got our table submission in and paid for, so hopefully that works out for us. And finally, I watched The Hangover this weekend, so I'm ready for a trip to Vegas.
You're ready for Vegas. Okay, we are not doing anything that's in that movie. I'm here to tell you. I do not need a longer police record. Changing subjects. What's your benchtop look like?
I've been plucking away at the Morris tractor still. No bigger than that thing is. You'd think I'd be done by now, but I've been working on the wheels, and I'm about ready to add those to the model. I've been using Adam Wilder's Aqualine product on those wheels, kind of playing around with that because I bought some of those back in the spring, and I've never used them before. I figured this is a good opportunity to try them out.
And what's your impression of them generally?
For me, just learning, it's a lot different than a solvent-based product. These are a water-based. I don't know if they're a gouache or a watercolor. The surface tension for the stuff is a lot higher than a solvent-based product, of course. Mm-hmm. And you got to kind of work it into the surface because it might try to beat up on you because you're trying to put it down over some other product.
Right.
But once it's on there and you get it spread and it dries, you can go back at any time with a damp brush and just start taking off what you don't want.
Yeah, I've seen that in the night shift videos. That's the thing that he touts the most about it.
Now, this dry earth color I'm using is a very pale grayish brown, and I really like it. And it's finally, it's giving me the tire tread kind of dusty down in the grooves and nooks and crannies of the tire tread that I've kind of always been chasing. I like it because it doesn't run everywhere because the surface tension's higher. I feel like there's some pretty good control over it. I'll tell you the odd thing about this stuff, they've got this stuff loaded up with vanilla scent. And it smells like a Starbucks sugar bomb.
Really?
Yeah, and it is not a recommendation, folks, trust me. But the stuff looks and smells like it would be divine.
Really?
That'd probably be a big mistake. It'd probably be more like a colonoscopy prep or something.
But it's interesting that it's so heavily scented with vanilla and sweet. I wonder if they're using that to mask an unpleasant odor, or if for some reason vanilla is part of the actual product base. Or
I think I heard somewhere it was just so you'd finally have a pleasant smell at your workbench.
hey, works for me.
Yeah, I bet this stuff doesn't really have a scent without anything in it because it's a water based product.
Sure.
I'm going to keep playing with it. I'm about done with the wheels. I'll get those glued on, and then I got to do wheels. I've got wheels to do for the Bofors gun as well, but not quite ready to do that. I don't know yet. Verdict's still out. I showed it on the Facebook page, and some people asked what I thought. I'm going to try to get my thoughts collected up and write a little blurb about it. Hopefully this weekend.
Cool.
I like the way it came out, so I guess that's one plus. Other than that, I haven't done a whole lot. I haven't got anything done on the aircraft I'm working on. I've got nothing done on the anti-tank gun. And I need to finish something because I'm really itching to start something kind of big and complex.
Uh-oh.
So that's my update. Not a lot. What do you got going on? Did you make more negative progress?
I'm happy to tell the listeners that after a couple of weeks of negative progress in my little disaster regarding the resin wheels for the M30, I finally am back making positive progress. I got the wheels stripped, got them cleaned off with 91% alcohol, which worked really well to strip off the paint that wasn't adhering well. Went back, cleaned the whole thing with the alcohol to try and get rid of whatever silicone remnant or whatever it was from the mold that was keeping the paint from sticking to the wheels. Got that done. I used the AK Real Colors thinned with unicorn tears to respray both the gray wheel tire color and then the Russian green color for the hubs. It came out beautifully. The paint is sticking well. Amazingly enough, that really did seem to re-energize my mojo. So I went from that to getting back to work on the actual gun. I am at the point of just about to marry the gun shield to the body of the gun itself, and it's looking good. I like it. It's amazing when you're making progress modeling and you're liking the way it's developing, how that fires you up to continue forward. So my benchtop's looking good, and I'm hoping to have something that actually looks like a fully or nearly fully assembled artillery piece soon. And then I'm going to have to go back and rewatch all of Uncle Night Shift's videos because I'll have to paint and weather and chip and distress. And part of the reason for me doing this gun is to try some of those things that I've never tried before because I haven't built in this arena much at all. So good news to report.
On the topic of that model you're working on, you were grousing on the Facebook page last night or the night before about some missing parts. How'd that play out?
Well, it wasn't missing parts so much. First of all, let me go back and say, well, I can't say obscene words. We'll get this podcast rated. Trumpeter's instructions are less than ideal. They are severely suboptimal. They frackin' suck. And believe me, when this whole thing's done, I am going to write a detailed review calling out Trumpeter for all of their instruction problems. But I was working last night, and Trumpeter called out placing some small rivet-like or hex bolt-like parts, but they didn't have a sprue number or anything to tell you where to find them on the sprues that they give you. And I'm like, are they trying to tell me that they want me to make these, or what's going on? And I actually posted a photo of the instructions, put a post on our Facebook page, said, help me out here. What am I missing? Does anybody know? And a number of listeners chimed in to to help and to make suggestions. And one of our listeners, John Colasante, got it right. He was able to tell me that here's what Trumpeter does when they do that is on the sprue runner itself, they will mold little rivets or hex bolts or whatever, and then but they're not marked as part numbers, and they're not really obvious unless you're looking for them, to then you cut off and glue on the model. So John, even though he built other Trumpeter kits where he had run into this, and apparently that's how he knew, but he saved me some major frustration. So John, if you're listening, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody who responded to that particular post. So that's pretty much what's been happening on my benchtop. So Mike, have you been looking at the kit and tool and accessory releases? What's got you interested? What's got you amazed? What's got you stunned?
Well, I'm always looking. Well, if you got a few, we'll go back and forth.
Okay. You first.
My first one is, I don't know if it's Reich or Rich Models, one of the smaller Hong Kong Chinese makers. They have also announced a French FCM-36 light tank.
I saw that.
And it's interesting. Well, it's interesting on one account because I saw that on the modeling news. And then I jumped over to Armorama, and they just today listed the ICM kit, which was announced like 2 months ago or more.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to our last segment on the dying hobby. It looks like we now may have a choice of 2 FCM-36 light tanks in plastic. So,
did you ever think you would see such a thing?
I'd hope for one, and everything else was resin.
Yeah.
That was one of those you thought would be resin forever only, right?
Right.
But now we get 2.
Fantastic. Speaking of 2, I mentioned on a previous episode that Wolfpack Models had announced an F5E. Well, then Dream Model also announced and then came out with an F5E kit. So we got two brand new mold F5Es. The Dream Model one that's been released has been some criticism of it. One, it's not particularly cheap when you consider you're getting a 72nd scale jet fighter. 2, they didn't provide, the way they did the kit doesn't provide you an ability to build all of the various options. But we just got news within the last week with Wolfpack telling us that in their F5E, which is going to be apparently about half the price of the Dream Model kit, that they're going to give us both noses for the F5. They're going to give us both leading edge extension shapes for the F5E. And it's also, just like the Dream Model kit, it's being molded such that they will be able to later come out with the 2-seat F5F. So the Wolfpack one is looking like it's going to give us all of the options that we wanted and that some people were complaining were going to be lacking in the Dream Model kit. So that's good news. How about your next?
Sticking with the theme of 2s, did you see that TACOM release of a Mark III Chieftain in 72nd scale?
Yes, I did.
You know, that's a fairly large tank, and it's pretty decent size. It's a handful based on the photographs in the article on the modeling news in 72nd scale. Looks really sharp, and it's a 2-for-1+1 kit, so you actually get 2 of them in the box.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something I would buy, but that's the quality of their 72nd scale stuff and some of the other 72nd scale armor and military vehicles is really, really raising the bar. And that kit looks really, really sharp. It's got a really interesting jig in it to get the Lincoln length track squared away before you actually put them on the wheels.
Yeah.
There's some interesting photo etch for the engine deck, looks like. I don't know. Maybe I will get it.
Good. Well, I'm telling you, 70-second scale. I've got you building the aircraft, the float planes, catapults. It's not a big reach to get you to build 70-second scale armor. And I agree with you. TACOM's stuff is very impressive in 70-second scale. I built the Special Hobby V2, which was nice, a very nice kit. Nothing wrong with it at all. And then TACOM released a V2, and I bought it. I haven't built it yet, but having examined it closely, it is really, really nice. Their quality of their molding and their detail is fantastic.
Got another one?
I do indeed. My next one is not exactly a yawn, but it was excitement that turned into not disappointment. But I the other day saw a ad for the Tamiya F-35B, the vertical takeoff and landing version of the F-35 in 70-second scale. And I was thinking, oh, great, a new Tamiya kit. And only when you looked closely did you realize what this was. It's the Italeri F-35B that's being marketed in Japan and reboxed and sold into by Tamiya, because Tamiya and Italeri actually have a arrangement where Italeri kits are resold and rebranded and sold under the Tamiya boxing. Now, I will give them credit. What Tamiya does, this is not stealth. What Tamiya does is they actually put not only their own logo and branding, but they also put the Italeri logo on the box top. So you can quickly figure out that, no, this is not a brand new Tamiya kit. This is actually an Italeri, a rebox of the Italeri kit. So, no criticism from them. And the Italeri kit, while wouldn't be my first choice, is not a bad kit. It's just I was a little disappointed because I got a little bit excited when I saw Tamiya brand new kit F-35B, and I got excited, as you would for any new Tamiya 70-second scale release, and then a little bit of disappointment set in. So not their fault, more really my fault, but still a little bit of disappointment, even if it was self-inflicted.
Well, I got a little bit of the same thing in my next two here, actually. I don't know how many more you've got, but
I got one more.
Okay, well, I'll close up with my second one. But this one, there's been lots of hobby boss and trumpeter wayward subject selection over the last several months, and that's Mike Baskett's opinion only. I'm sure some people revel at the latest Russian truck or Israeli obscure APC or whatever. That's all fine.
Right.
But they're due for something World War II vintage, I think, that's just, I don't know. They're due for something good. They need to go Carole King on it.
Carole King?
I want to feel the earth move under my feet. A BT5, that would do it. A BT5, that would get it.
Well, I like the way you put that. Well, my last one is, again, keeping with the theme of twos. There is a trainer called a SIAI Marchetti SF-260. And it's a trainer, and it's also used as a light attack aircraft. The Italians used them as their trainer, and then they were sold all over, both some civilian uses. In fact, here in the U.S., there's a company that will let you fly air combat against another one of these airplanes with and they've got video and HUD sites and everything, and you engage in actual air combat flying with a licensed pilot. So these things are in civilian use as well. Well, we didn't have any kits of the SF-260 for a long time. And then within the last week, we got Special Hobby announcing they were doing an SF-260. And then KP comes out with 4 different boxings of their kit of the SF-260. So we went from 0 to 2 kits overnight. So it was an embarrassment of riches. And that while it might not be my first choice as my next model to build, it's nice that the demand is out there for kits like this. So I can't say I'm anything but happy.
Well, my big yawn is Italeri has announced their Simavente M42, the 75 millimeter self-propelled gun.
Yep.
I think this is the old bait and switch, maybe.
How so?
They tout this as new tool. And I tell you, they mentioned this on the bench, and I think Julian smelled a rat, but he couldn't put his finger on it. But I'll tell you what it is, because I looked at the sprue shots. They're saying it's new tool, but the lower hull pan is a new tool and a new design. The original Italeri Simavente had a bathtub hull that was just full of ejector pin marks on the hull floor. It's got a semi-interior kit, not really complete, but the transmission's there and the gun breech and all that. The balance of the kit looks like possibly new tooled molds, but to the old design, because the parts layout is identical. The figures are identical. Everything about the entire kit, except for the lower hull, appears to be rehash. So we'll have to wait and see, but that's a classic old kit, and it's really not too terrible, I don't think. Well, there's some accuracy issues because somebody did a big resin upgrade for it, one of the Italian resin makers, to fix a lot of that. But I'm skeptical that it's a completely new tool. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Well, moving on, our special segment tonight is a little bit of discussion about T-34s and a couple of the Facebook groups. Let's get on into that discussion. Well, listeners, tonight we've got another interview and discussion for you. We have Mr. Stephen Reed joining us tonight, and Steve's an ex-Navy guy who happens to be an armor modeler. More importantly, for the topic of tonight's discussion, we're going to talk a little bit about the T-34 interest groups that are on Facebook, and then maybe get out into a little of the modeling specific stuff on top of that. So welcome to Plastic Model Mojo, Stephen.
Thank you, Mike.
Just so we can level set our listeners, would you mind giving any background you're comfortable with?
Oh, sure.
Age, profession, geography, all that kind of stuff.
I'm 54 years old. I've been modeling since I was 7 years old. I live in Southeast Georgia. And as my profession, I'm an instructor for the control room operators in an electric generating station.
What's your modeling history like?
I started modeling when I was about 7 years old. My mom and dad are from England, and we lived in Scotland for a period of time. And all the kids in the neighborhood were building models, and my brother and I got into it. And as he got older, he lost interest in it, but I never really did. I just stayed with it. So I think of it as the addiction that does me nothing but good. So
I think we'd agree with that.
Absolutely. So did you start with Airfix kits?
Yep. My first model was a 1/72nd scale Airfix Bolt and Paul Defiant.
Oh, nice model.
This was in like 1973, 74. And Britain was still all about reliving the war years. So kids' comics, we didn't have superheroes. We had basically comic books that had the heroes were Spitfire pilots and British soldiers in Burma and British tank operators. And, that was where it was at. And all the kids were into the Battle of Britain and Airfix 1/72nd scaled Spitfires and 109s. That was what it was all about. Every kid I knew had a bunch of aircraft thumbtacked to the ceiling of their room hanging from fishing line. So I got into that, but I built a lot of the 1/72nd scale aircraft, and then I built a 1/76 scale Airfix Churchill. And then following that, I moved back to the United States and discovered Monogram and Shep Payne's how to build diorama pamphlets. And after that, I just never looked back. It was 1/35th scale armor. And I think the first kit I ever built was 1/35th scale armor kit. Was a Bedford. It was a Peerless Max Bedford QL Portee. And that thing was a nightmare. But I was about maybe 11, and I rattle can sprayed it with something from the hardware store. So it wasn't a thing of beauty.
But it was awesome.
Yeah, but then I think I built a Tamiya quad flak ring, and then my father introduced me to model clubs because he worked with somebody who was involved in an IPMS club, and it just, took off from there. But took a little hiatus like we all do when I was in high school and working and trying to get my career going. And then I got, when I was doing a lot of Navy deployments, I started to, bring along the X-Acto knife and some styrene and try to at least scrape the parts out to sea. And it was good, got back into it. I actually had a funny story. Met my wife. We were dating for about a year. We got married. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment, and she said, "What do you want to do with the second bedroom?" And I said, "Well, that'll be the tank room." And she said, "What?" So I hadn't even told her I was into modeling, but we've been married for 30 years last year, and she's sure into it now. She was on the phone with her sister one time and said, "My husband plays with toys."
I think we've all been there.
Yep.
I think so.
And then when I had just gotten out of the Navy, so about mid-1990s, I lived in Syracuse, New York area. And I had a couple of friends from the neighborhood that worked at Lockheed Martin. And one thing led to another. I ended up building models for Lockheed as a sideline for a while. And then I never really talked about it because I knew what I was building was, 10 years away from entering service if it was going to at all. And then I heard my wife on the phone with her sister again, and she's saying, "Well, he's got quite a talent there. And, if he can make some money off of it, I say more power to him." So it was amazing how just the addition of some money shifted the whole thing from toys to brilliance.
You mentioned model clubs. Do you have any current involvement?
Yes. Having moved around quite a bit, I still keep in touch with the AMPS Nordland guys up in Massachusetts. I was a Wildcats AMPS member in Columbia, South Carolina. I still keep in touch with those people. All great people in both clubs. And I got moved down to South Georgia, and I'm near Fort Stewart, the Army base. And there is no AMPS club here, but I'm interested in starting one. And I'm in contact with 5 or 6 guys that build models, but the COVID came along right about the same time, so we haven't gotten together. But the chapter is a registered chapter of AMPS. The only thing we don't have is members.
Gotcha.
But we're trying to roll it out. I go to as many AMPS shows a year as I can.
Well, we've not been in a while, but Dave and I used to be regulars. Up until about 2003, I think.
Yeah,
it's been a while now, but
I really like the AMPS. I really like the AMPS system because the judging is so detailed, so much effort goes into it, and you really kind of feel like you put your model in there, you're going to get a realistic assessment of how good it is. It's more like standing up next to a yardstick than other judging systems, I think.
So now, did you go to AMPS when it was up in Maryland?
Oh, yeah. I went. Yeah. I think the first time I went was probably 1993 or 94.
Yeah, well, then we probably were there at the same time and didn't realize it.
Do you remember when Bob Calignon won best of best and everything? They said he ate the whole cherry pie. That was the year, my first year there, and it was a good time. It's always a good time. Nice, very nice people in that organization, and it's real fun. I was in an IPMS club in Tidewater, Virginia, when I was in the Navy, and one of the guys there, his name's Joe Koenig. He was a good friend of mine, still is, and he taught me how to airbrush. I was so frustrated with how my painting didn't look like everybody else's, and I owned an airbrush, but I didn't know how to operate it. And I just said to him, "I'm either going to learn how to airbrush or quit." And he said, "I'll be right over." It was just run it. I just have been very fortunate to run into a lot of generous people over many years.
Well, let's get on topic here, which is the T-34 interest group on Facebook, and then the companion page or group, the T-34 scale modeling group. How did you become involved with those two Facebook groups?
Well, 7 or 8 years ago, there was a group called Model Armor that Vinny Brannigan ran. It was a forum, and I started doing build blogs on there, and there were a lot of great guys involved in that too. But I started to gravitate toward the T-34s, and I would finish one, build another, and there were a lot of people kind of chiming in on that and telling me, when I was making a wrong turn. I mean, nobody likes somebody to chime in and say, oh, by the way, that hatch handle is facing the wrong direction after your model's all painted and weathered. So as soon as I got involved in a blog like that, I started to appreciate that people would say, hey, I really don't mean to burst your bubble, but that's on backwards, that kind of stuff. And so I was able to get instant feedback, correct the errors, and move on. And being what I do for a living, I'm very comfortable being told when I'm wrong. It seemed like the more people were kind of open to feedback, the better it got. And then Model Armor dissolved, but I had met a few people through that. And one of them was Tim Roberts, who you guys are familiar with, the Prime Portal.
Yes.
All the T-34 stuff on there, seemingly. Tim provided a lot of it, Tim Roberts. And I was talking to him at one point, and I said, it would be great to have I was talking to him through Facebook, and I said, it'd be great to have some way to communicate strictly about T-34s, just like we were just kicking the idea around, and then Tim took it and did all of it. It is definitely, Tim founded the thing. He created the group. He decided to call it the T-34 interest group. And if I wasn't the second person to join it, I was certainly the top in the first 5. And it just has collected. It's succeeded beyond what anybody imagined, I think. I remember thinking that, wow, we've got 300 members. This is terrific. Who knew 300 people cared about T-34s? But now it's been going for 7 years, and it's got more than 5,000 members. And if you guys have been to it, you know that basically the cornerstone of the group is that it is run like a tight ship. There's not a lot of,
BS.
I was on let me just give you an example. I was on Facebook today. Some gentleman posted 2 different KV1 kits, not on the T-34 group, but on another. And he said, which one of these should I build? Just a guy getting into modeling. Which one should I do first? And somebody said, do the KV. They're both KVs. So it was just somebody thinking they were funnier than they really were. And, those comments land on the T-34 interest group too. We just clean them out immediately. Most people don't even know they were there. And if we get a hard time from somebody, wish them the best and send them on their way. We just have tried to run a very fair, but we don't have a high tolerance for people wasting each other's time. And it's been successful. So
you've mentioned one other name. Are there any other principals involved that you'd like to give a shout out to before we get too far into this?
Tim Roberts was the founder. Almost immediately early on, Alex Zarister, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but Alex Zarister came on board. We were very fortunate with Alex because Alex speaks and reads Russian, which I don't. And he's just able to source material that's just, he's the guy that comes up with they switched that feature at this factory in November of 43. And he's able to kind of get down into the detail that I wouldn't be able to, not reading Russian. He's a huge asset. And then over the years, there've just been a lot of people that have committed a lot of time and stayed with it. Greg Beckman is one of the moderators now. When we split off the modeling group, Dan Egan is a moderator over there. The core people, I would have to say Tim Roberts for founding it, and Alex Zarister for just being a resident genius.
Well, we might ought to let you tell the listeners, because not everybody's going to know, just exactly what the T-34 interest group is, and then also maybe a little bit about the scale modeling group, why there got to be a desire to differentiate the two.
T-34 interest group was more or less, we were looking for a place where people could share research information, and a lot of the people involved over there are very serious about, they're not interested in modeling. They're interested in factory production numbers. They're interested in why does this weld look the way it does? When did they change the casting techniques and all this? And also, there were 50,000 some T-34s. So they've served in every corner of the world. The Chinese have modified them. The East Germans have modified them. The Syrians modified them. The Egyptians modified them. And Tim Roberts was always one who could look at a tank and just go, oh yeah, that's a Czech production. That's a Polish production. And the guys on the T-34 interest group are really serious about that. And of course, there's a ton of overlap between the research and building models. And I was always interested in the research because I built models. And then slowly but surely, as I started to talk to some people, we found out there were some modelers. And I talked to Tim about, at some point we should spin off a T-34 scale modeling group. And the first mention of that was probably 3 or 4 years ago. But finally, the number of posts that were model related, Alex Zarister said, this is just getting to be a little bit too much. And we've got a large enough member base that we can do justice to both things separately. The T-34 interest group is the place where you post an obscure photograph of a T-34 that you've never seen before, and people from all over the world just dissect it and tell you, based upon that grab handle, it came from this factory, and based upon that exhaust shroud, it came from this factory. This is a rebuild, and the modeling is just taking all that information or none of it and just trying to build T-34. So, by very nature, you would think the T-34 interest group would create rivet counters, and it absolutely does. But we started off with the T-34 scale modeling group, and we said, look, there's going to be beginners here. There's going to be what-if modelers. There's going to be, as long as it doesn't get too crazy. The only thing that will really get you in trouble, I build what-ifs too, because every once in a while you just want to take a break from doing the heavy-duty research and just pull out some plastic and use whatever skill you want to use at the time. That's how what-ifs get made. But we want to make it so that somebody who's building their first kit ever can post a T-34 on there and get something of value out of it.
I'm also, in addition to a scale modeler, I'm a military collector, and my area of focus is Soviet or Red Army uniforms from 1935 to 1945, combat-related branches, armor, artillery, infantry. I've got a lot of uniforms, gear, and equipment. A lot of that's been possible because after the Iron Curtain fell in 92, there was a deluge of both availability of material and availability of information.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts about the T-34, like USSR pre-1992 and then post-1992, and how that's changed for both the historian and the modeler?
Yeah, the Iron Curtain coming down helped a lot. I'm sure we're about the same vintage, so I'm sure you remember if you wanted to look at T-34 pictures when you were in high school, there was anything Steve Zaloga produced and very little else. I mean, it was affordable. There might have been some high dollar books out there, but nothing that I could afford. And then all of a sudden, people started, like Prime Portal shows up, and people start taking their photographs that they took during various exercises and posting them. And then people within the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, started posting. So the information now, there's the relationship between the two countries is so much better. We got Facebook. I have friends, at least through Facebook, in Russia, and we don't fear each other the way we used to. And so now it's okay to post, the picture that Grandpa took. And it's just the number of T-34 photographs available is just astronomical. And prior to that, most of the pictures you'd find of T-34s were from the German perspective, knocked out tanks. But
the published material especially was all from German sources. And in fact, one of the old Squadron Signal books has what amounts to an apology in the front of it about how the photographs seem to portray only one side of it. But, that's at the time that book was published, that was the only photography source that there was.
I think your typical German soldier, or maybe not typical, but some of the German soldiers were, well enough off that they owned their own camera. Not to mention they had a propaganda units as well. Some of the German soldiers actually had their own cameras. It was probably a lot more rare for a Russian conscript to have one.
We've actually mentioned on the show before that as a reference source for modeling, I often talk about German eBay, because there were a lot of Germans who went to war with cameras, and it was a hobby before the war, and it was highly encouraged, and they could buy film at their unit canteens and have their film processed at the unit canteen. And particularly before 1943, there are just thousands and thousands of photographs. And, on the T-34 interest group, you can tell because they've got somebody's copy protection watermark all over them, but just really rare photographs. They're one of a kinds, really, and just showing lots of T-34s that nobody's ever seen before.
When the T-34 became, in the Mythical Weapon book, they talk about how the T-34 became a myth. And you can imagine that if you're a U.S. soldier in France and you see a Tiger, you're going to want to get a picture with that, especially if you're kind of a rear echelon guy. But some of the T-34s early war, it seems to me, this is purely speculation, but it seems to me that as the Germans became more and more afraid of them, they would photograph the T-34s that were just demolished. I mean, you've seen them with the engine block is thrown out, the turret's gone. It looks like engineering troops just blew it to pieces, and it was more or less a propaganda shot so they could say, oh yeah, this is their, indomitable T-34. Here's one in 1,000 pieces. That reminds me, I will tell you this. The one thing that'll get you in trouble in either one of those groups is if you join the group and your first post is, what's better, a Tiger or a T-34? Those kind of, those will get you. I'm contest to jettison those folks. I mean, really, it's like we're trying to be a little serious here.
So, Stephen, do you remember the first T-34 kit you built?
Yeah.
What was it?
I built the Tamiya Su-85, and I built a diorama of that like a young kid would, and it was plaster of Paris snow and baking soda over it, and actually entered it in a model contest. That might have been the first model contest I ever entered, and I was not successful. Not even at juniors. It was horrible.
I was going to say, my only claim to fame, the only 35th scale tank I have ever built in my life is the Tamiya original T-34, where you have to close up the sponsons and all that.
Yeah,
it's the only one I've ever built.
I've shortly after that, I built. There's a military modeler magazine where it was called Panther Counterattack was the article, and Randy Roy built a Panther and 2 knocked out T-34s, and I read that article so many times that I can recite it from memory even now. And I wanted to build a T-34-76, so I got the Tamiya kit, the only game in town. I built it. And I still have that one. So definitely built that when I was about 15. So I've had that model for 42 years. No, I'm not 57. Let me do my math again. Yeah, a long time.
So can you give some examples of the type of information that someone new to the interest group might see on there?
The greatest thing is people come to the T-34 interest group, and the first thing they want to know is, how do you differentiate between the factories? And I struggle with that even now. So that's a huge question. The greatest thing about the T-34 interest group, the research side of it, is you say, look, I want to build a model of this tank. If you go and you just Google T-34, T-34 Rec, T-34-76, T-34-85, SU, anything, and you Google it and flip over to images, and you can find lots and lots of images. So then you can come to the T-34 interest group and post the picture and say, help me dissect this. And that's what we love to do on that site. And people, people will chime in with some obvious stuff. People will chime in with some really off the wall stuff. But what you're really going to find out is whether or not the tank is like factory original or if it's been rebuilt. Because when they got rebuilt, they'd be rebuilt at various factories. When the Germans rebuilt one, they used whatever they had. You can see the craziest mismatches of wheel types, but the combination of parts that could be rebuilt and make a serviceable tank was crazy. So that's where it becomes really interesting. And then you shift over and take that same photograph, post it on the Scale Modelers group, and say, how do I get there from nothing? What kit should I start with? And the same phenomenon goes on. People chime in and go, hey, what you want is the Dragon so-and-so kit, and you can use the hull from the Academy kit. That's what kind of makes it really fascinating for me and a lot of the other members.
Well, I for one, I'm a lurker. I've not contributed a whole lot, but I've absorbed a lot from the site. There's a gentleman doing a lot of line drawings.
Yeah, that's Mark Retheret. Yeah, Mark was one of the guys that was involved in Model Armor too. And like many, many people, Mark gets turned off on Facebook and he'll bail for a while and then he shows up again. But Mark is another one of the, not quite a founder, but certainly a fixture of both groups. He's very knowledgeable, a real thinker, and his drawings are absolutely terrific. And I've actually gotten a few off of him that he sent to me signed, which I really prized possession. And Mark looks at things and sees things that would escape, we're talking people that are just so detail oriented. Anyway, he just today, he was working on a blog on the Model Armor forum years ago. We're talking 9 years ago, where he partially completed a T-34 76. And he's going to revive that, at least for a while. We'll see how long it keeps his interest. But yeah, his drawings are great. He's working with another member of the group to publish a book, and Mark's doing all the drawings. So I'm excited about that happening. His drawings are unbelievable.
You mentioned his issue with Facebook, or it's not an uncommon thing. People kind of get burned out unless you do like I do, and you learn to tune Facebook to your own interests, and then you don't have to deal with all the crap on there.
Right.
But anyway, I guess you guys went to Facebook. Are you happy with the platform, and as opposed to like a traditional web-based forum? And I come from a military collecting background. We've seen a lot of traffic in the forums taper off due to Facebook. And I think it's probably due to the ease that Facebook represents as far as posting and running with stuff. But on the downside, I think Facebook groups tend to have a information retrieval, search and retrieval challenge sometimes that the forums don't have. I think they're a little bit better for that. So what do you think about that?
Well, the T-34 interest group, like I said, launched like 7-8 years ago. And at the time, Facebook was kind of blowing up and the forums were dying out. And what attracted me to the Facebook platform is that on a forum, I basically don't have any control over who's on it. And the forums were really getting kind of overrun by trolls. So when you get to Facebook, I've even got friends that annoy me so bad that I just say, look, snooze them for 30 days. Snooze for 30 days is the greatest thing ever. If we could, I often say, if we could get a snooze till November 3rd, that would be even better, because I don't like to talk about politics when I'm trying to relax. Facebook is not ideal. It's difficult a modeling blog is probably better suited for a forum. But if you can search the forums, you can also just post a request and say, hey, I know this was here, because the keywords stick in my head. The trouble with Facebook probably is like we had, I was on today and we have this problem is somebody says there's a new kit being released. And about 3 weeks later, somebody else posts, hey, look, this kit's going to be released. Yeah, we already discussed it to death about 3 weeks ago, and here's the first 4 members that have built it, So it's not perfect. Maybe it's, in the next few years, there'll be something that has the best features of both, but being able to kind of control a little bit of who you run into is kind of a nice feature.
Well, I think you guys do a remarkable job of keeping it running smooth, and especially Mark's drawings. It just makes me curious what's going to be in this book, because he's done a lot of great drawings, and I haven't done too much on the scale modeling group yet, but I've followed a couple of the builds, and that looks like that's going to be really interesting too. I think that was a great idea. I think splitting those two out for you guys was probably wise.
Oh man, I appreciate that. Because we agonized over it. And like I said, we probably discussed it for 3 years before we finally just took the plunge and did it. But as far as the T-34 scale modeling group, if you look back, we launched it in July, I believe, and it has taken off. But there was a period of time there where I talked to Greg Beckman through Messenger, and I said, hey, Greg, would you please post something? Because I'm starting to feel like this is a vanity page. Because, for the first couple of weeks, the content was my content and I was running out. I was like, every time I glue a grab handle onto some tank, I post an update. And, in the last few days I looked, and there's, you got to scroll a ways down to find anything of mine. And I'm pretty happy about that. It's catching on. We've got we're closing in on 500 members. And I mean, that's enough. That's plenty. But I think it'll continue to grow. I think it'll continue to grow, especially with Mini Art and Border Model and RFM, Ryfield Model, doing everything they can to help us out.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Dave and I've called it the year of the T-34, which is kind of why I wanted to get you on here.
Boy, the last time I heard that was 1997 when the Dragon kit came out. And I think that was a Steve Zaloga quote from one of his reviews of the very first Dragon T-34 85.
That brings up one of the questions. I mean, Mike and I have joked that this is the year of the T-34 because it seems like not a week or two goes by without a new announcement. What do you think? Do you have any ideas as to why you think all of a sudden we're getting a spate of new T-34 kits?
Geez, that's a good question. I don't know why there would be like a sudden influx of so many. I think Mini Art was toying with the idea for a long time, and I think they finished up the T-55 series, or they've taken it most of the way that they want to go. And the next, logical step for them is to do everything to do with the T-34, or at least that's what I hope. If they do for T-34s what they have done for T-54s and 55s, this is gonna be revolutionary. But I think if I was in a model company if I was running Zvezda, for example, and I knew that Mini Art was coming out with theirs, I'd take a wait and see approach. But I think they just all finally seem to just get tired of waiting, and they just released them. And I mean, the Zvezda kits are in many ways the equal of Dragon, and I bought them directly from Russia, and they were like $11. So ridiculous. There's going to be quite a range. I mean, when your Mini Art kits are $85, but they include an interior and everything, I'm just talking ballparks here. Mini Art doesn't call me up to set pricing. In fact, none of these model companies have anything to do with it for them. So, but Zvezda is a smoking deal, especially if you have a deep Dragon parts box from all the other Dragon kits you built. RFM, I have not bought the kit, but I've been looking at the sprue breakdown, and it looks like a real simple kit with some nice detail. And then the border models, T-34 with the supplemental armor, I've already got that one. It's not perfect, but they never are. And I'm not a big fan of. I'm a big fan of talking about what needs to be fixed, not kind of bashing it with the why didn't they?
Well, one of my bullet items was the T-34 scale model situation. You touched on a little bit there. Of the current selection, what do you think's the best or the better of the ones out there? And then the converse of that, what are the ones you might do best to avoid?
I think Mini Art is. No, I don't own one yet, but I don't think there's any doubt. I have the SU-85 and SU-122 from Mini Art. They're going to be very tough to beat. If you get a bargain on the AFE Club kits, they're not bad because the interior parts are good to have. In terms of real disappointments, I've got the Academy kit, and I built that as a tank retriever because I didn't like the cast texture on the turrets. They give you 2 turrets, and both of them, you're really going to need some work to tone that down. I've got the ICM kits, and I've got the Academy T-34 76s too. When I go through any kit like this, I just open them up and start looking at the parts and saying, I will use that. I can modify that. No way I'm using that. And the kit that I really ended up with the least parts left over from the original was the ICM T-34s and 135th scale. And I don't know anything about 172nd. I've always been a 135th scale guy for quite a while. My approach to modeling, I sort of imagine, if you imagine some guys deciding they were going to go out and climb a mountain on the weekend, and they get to the foot of the hill and they look up and they go, well, that's going to be tricky. That's going to be tough. Why didn't they do this? Why didn't God do that? And I just imagine like modeling should almost be the same thing. This is what I've got to work with. What am I going to do about it? So yeah, the ICM kit is the weakest and the Mini Art's going to be the strongest, but everything in between there is definitely workable. Even the old Tamiya kits, I still have several of them around because I use some parts off of there when I'm, for example, the vision slits on a cupola. The Tamiya parts are great for that. They're great to have around.
Separate pieces.
Yeah, nice and easy to work with. Some of the Dragon T-34 85 parts are so difficult to get off the sprue and clean up, like the periscopes, that when I came up with a good set of those, I just made a mold and I cast them now. It's far more simple to cast a good set than to clean the sprue gates off of the Dragon parts. I don't know if that answered your question, but basically you can make a T-34 out of any of these. It's, in fact, if the Mini Art kit may be so good that I don't even enjoy building it, if that's
You sound like me.
I take a Dragon hull and I cut everything off of it, fenders, and then I replace it all with styrene strip. And I got, years ago when I was resin casting, I had a guy, as part of my payment, he designed me a set of T-34 fenders. So I photo etch my own T-34 fenders now, and they cut a full sheet of photo etched fenders is 70 sets of fenders, and I got 2 sheets of it, so I'm not going to run out of those. This is what you can do when you just focus on one major tank type.
Yeah. What would you say for a modeler getting into T-34s as an enthusiast and a modeler? What are the of the available reference material out there now? What are the high points, the must-have books, articles, or web pages in addition to the T-34 interest group?
I think if you're really getting serious about it, the Mythical Weapon book is a great book. People will tell you that, politically the writer seemed to have an axe to grind, that he wanted to convince everybody that it wasn't the great weapon that everybody thought it was. Fair enough. There are some issues with some of the scale drawings. There's some accuracy issues, but I challenge anybody to write a book that huge and then not get to the end and say, oh, wow, I never corrected X, Y, and Z. I can't even write a paragraph without wishing I hadn't the next day. So it's a great book. And the T-34 interest group makes it an even better book, because you can say, I've got the T-34 Mythical Weapon here, and I have a question about the photograph on page X. And almost everybody involved with that group has the book. So as a point of starting conversations, it can't be beat. But I think the T-34 interest group is a great companion to that book. Alex Zarister would be able to tell you what books, depending on your language. There's some really good Polish books. Primarily, there's a series of books called Frontline Illustrated that are great.
Yeah, I've got those.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like you like what I like, which is if you can show me a scale drawing and a picture of a knocked out tank, or a tank that's in battle, really beat up, I'm pretty happy. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
I think the T-34 Mythical Weapon is just it's their currently that's the Bible. Get that, and you'll be able to, it'll be the good basis for some learning about T-34s.
You hit upon this a little bit, but is there anyone you know of in the Facebook groups working with anyone in the industry, the plastic model industry at all right now?
I don't think so. If they are, they haven't told me about it.
Or they don't know they are, because they're just on the forum gleaning information from everybody.
Well, it's like, when I was building models professionally, it's kind of that nice, it's great work if you can get it. And, if anybody had known that I was willing to do something for Lockheed Martin for $50, somebody would call up and say, I'll do it for $49. So, it's kind of when you're tied up with, if there's anybody communicating with, let's say, RFM Mini Art, they're just keeping it to themselves. But one of the members, Francis Pullum, he's writing a book. He hasn't made a secret of it, and Mark's doing the drawings for that book. And I'm really looking forward to that. It should be excellent.
So now to get into a topic that's really close to me, because there are 2 versions of the T-34 that up until, well, technically neither one of them are still kitted currently.
Right.
The first of those is 2020, and we're still without a mainstream T-34-76 model 1942 from the STZ factory.
Yep.
And to me, that seems like, maybe I'm assuming everybody thinks like I do, but with all the final STZ features, that seems like probably the most popular 76 millimeter gun version out there, period.
Yeah. I don't dispute that at all. So let me ask you something. Do you have one? Do you own one? One of the Cyber Hobby ones?
Yes, I do.
Okay. If anybody out there wants to build a T-34-76 STZ model 1942, or just find one of those and set it aside. And the reason why I say that is because with the proliferation of 3D printing, somebody's going to come out with an upper deck and we'll all be in business. It's not a difficult part to design. It's not a difficult part to make.
Oh, apparently it was for somebody at Dragon.
Yeah. Here's the really strange thing about that. When Dragon re-released it as a Butte Panzer, the kit number was 6449, and you've seen it. It's got a Panzer III. I'm opening my drawers in the background because I can know I've got one. So they re-released it. I had the kit that we're talking about. The original STZ was a Cyber Hobby kit number 6388. and the STZ model 1941 was 6355. These are Dragon part numbers. So when they came out with 6449, it was in 2014, and they basically threw a bunch of Panzer III sprues in there and said, this is a Butte Panzer. And the original media buzz was that they'd corrected it. Well, I bought one of those. I had a 6388 completely unopened, and I peeled off the wrap just to match the parts, and there's no change whatsoever.
Well, that's good to know.
The interesting thing, they're identical. So if you're looking around for a 6388 cyber hobby and you're finding that the prices don't look good, just keep your eyes open for a 6449. They're the same thing with some Panzer parts you can give to a friend of yours that builds those. But when they did the 6388, the lower hull that all Dragon T-34 kits use has 2 bump stops in the forward position. And for some reason, they decided, this is cyber hobby, this is elite. We got to have a lower hull with 1 bump stop. Well, they shortened the lower hull and they lengthened the upper hull. And this is where the angles started to get crazy. That upper hull fits better on any other T-34 lower hull you can find. All the other lower hulls are the same. But other than that, the turret's just a little bit too far back. And, there are people. There's a modeler on builds a lot of great stuff. He goes by Machine Krieger. You know that guy? He built the Cyber Hobby STZ kit 6388, and he just trimmed the back panel and made it fit and just moved on, and his model looks amazing and beautiful. And if you don't mind just shaving that couple millimeters off and moving the bolts, you can make it work. But no, that's not a lot of there's another couple guys that have done it by sawing the hull apart and moving it around, and it can be done. It's just a challenge.
There was also the TMD offering in resin that lasted about 8 seconds before it was out of production. That's the all resin kit. It still has a few minor issues, but it was a beautiful thing. But I just never got around to buying one when it was out there.
TMD talked about tooling that up, and I don't think enough people expressed an interest that they did it. But I've got one, and it's a resin kit, and I think if I was going to build it, I would use the hull, use the turret, and when it came to the road wheels and the track, I'd just use Dragon parts because they're virtually identical, and it'd be easier to deal with the plastic.
Now, another favorite of mine that I think we're going to get because we almost have it now is the D5T ARM T-3485, but Mini Art for some reason started in the middle instead of doing the initial version. I'm not sure why they did that.
D5T,
the D5T. It's not a match for the Dmitry Donskoy Brigade tanks that are so famously photographed. You need to go a mark earlier. I think it's a late 43 production vehicle. I think we'll get that one. That was on my hit list. I mentioned that one in an earlier episode. So I was excited to see Mini Art actually at least get a turret out there with the right armament in it. Right. And hopefully the other one will follow suit shortly. I think it will.
Yeah. The backlog of, I have a file on my laptop that's T-34 Dream Projects, and I've got enough lined up to build for the rest of my life. It's just going to be very cool to get some more kits to dissect and say, what can I use this part for? What can I use that part for? And that's what the interest groups helps you to do. And when you were saying earlier, if I was advising a new builder into T-34s, I would tell the person, forget the idea of being able to do what you want to do with one kit, because it's when the tanks were rebuilt, they became more and more and more interesting.
Well, one final question for you tonight. What out there does not exist yet in the T-34 family that you would like to see kitted in plastic?
I'd like to see the tank retrievers get done.
Yeah?
Yeah. The East German tank retriever based upon a Su-85 hull. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there are a lot of wild civilian adaptations of T-34 hulls. Did you ever see the one I posted a few times? It's a rail yard tractor. It's for pushing the rail cars into place and forming a train.
Yeah, I think I did, actually.
I don't think I'd like to see that in a kit. Somebody should have to convert to that. It wouldn't pay a company to make it, but all of the tank retrievers, after good 1942 STZ T-34-76, that'd be terrific. But the rest of it is, there are so many interesting variants, and a great number of them are impractical for a company to produce because they're one-offs. But a good tank retriever would be great.
Well, Steve, I think we're going to wrap it up there, and I appreciate you taking time to work with us and making this happen. And I encourage everyone out there to take a look at the Facebook groups you're moderating, T-34 Interest Group and the T-34 Scale Modeling Group. They're both very worthwhile for anyone with interest in T-34s. Dave, you got anything else?
Nope, I do. I've got to say, I enjoyed this, and listening to you two geek out about all of the different variants and sub-variants is interesting as all get out. And I got to say, even though I'm an airplane guy, I have a soft spot for the T-34. It's wicked cool looking.
Well, thanks. And thanks for the opportunity to talk to you guys. Wish you good luck with this episode of Scale Model Mojo. And I thank you for taking an interest in my T-34 interest group and the scale modeling group.
You're welcome. Maybe we'll meet at AMPS one of these days.
Yeah, I hope so. Be good. As long as you guys like to take an adult beverage, you're all right with me.
Oh, definitely.
You're going to like us a lot.
Yeah.
I heard that episode where you're drinking whiskey, so I already knew the answer to that one.
Well, we're back after that little interview, and what'd you think, Dave?
Well, first of all, I felt a little bit like an appendix there, or Ed McMahon, while Johnny Carson was on a roll with a great interview. Didn't have being not my area. It's I didn't have as much to contribute, but it's obvious that you and he model very similarly and think about modeling very similarly. Even though it's not my area, I find the T-34 endlessly fascinating just simply because of the number of variants and the number of places it was produced, and the fact that each factory seemed to do their own little thing with it. So I enjoyed it greatly. How about you?
Well, it's got me hot to dig out one of these T-34s I've kind of started in jest over the last few years. I tell you, when he talked about opening a kit and saying, I'm going to use that piece, I might use that if I change it a little bit, or there's no way I'm using those parts, that was exactly like me. I was really relating to him there. But we appreciate him for coming on, and everybody needs to check out those Facebook pages, especially if you're into T-34s. There are a few other pages. Well, there's a lot of other pages out there. There's a Sturmgeschütz one, several others. But the T-34 interest group and the T-34 scale modeling group by the same group of moderators are both just top notch. Really recommend those.
Absolutely. So, Mike, do you have any shout outs?
I do have a couple of shout outs.
Well,
I'm going to
give me one.
I'm going to tackle them both because they're very similar. My shout outs are Dennis Tennant out of Wisconsin and Danny St. Laurent out of Quebec, Canada. And both of these guys sent some really pleasant and supportive emails, not so much about modeling topics, but for instance, Dennis downloaded a bunch of Plastic Model Mojo episodes when he went from Wisconsin to Western Virginia to help his sister-in-law recover from an illness, and was dealing with a no internet, no TV situation. And, it's nice to hear that we can help people get through their day, and they like listening to us. That's just very encouraging.
Absolutely.
Similar from Danny. He's asking about some forums and stuff, which I gave him some references to some modeling forums for a beginner or a new modeler. And another guy just really liking the podcast and looks forward to every other Friday night when we drop and getting some modeling fluid and sitting down on his bench and listening to Plastic Model Mojo because it's helping his mojo.
That's fantastic.
So Dennis and Danny, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, on a related note, my shout out happens to be our listeners, particularly those who participate on our Facebook page. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, faced a little bit of a challenge modeling, something that that definitely could have stymied me a bit, and the willingness of our listeners and participants on the Facebook page to take a moment to help me out and to point me in the right direction. We've got a great little modeling community here, and I hope everybody likes it as much as I do. I enjoy it. I get a lot out of it. I get a lot of mojo from you guys. And especially in this time of COVID, when we're not seeing our modeling buddies, like we used to in in-person meetings or the local hobby shop, that's, this is filling a void, and I appreciate all of you. Thank you very much.
All right, well, Dave, we're getting to the end again.
Yep. You know what they say, Mike. So many kicks.
So little time. Have a good evening, Dave.